The new Archbishop of Canterbury has been announced. As the cross-section team, we talk about how we can respond when we might not agree with everything that she stands for. We also reflect on the fact that it has been 2 years since the attacks of October 7th, and we talk about what's been going on at the Conservative Party conference. This is an episode you do not want to miss. Hello and welcome back to Cross Section, the podcast where we talk all things faith, news and culture. Today I am joined by Danny in the studio. Good morning, Danny.
Good morning.
And Peter online. Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. We are coming together to record today on the 7th of October. We will get more into that in a minute. But as we kind of start the episode, before we get into our slightly more serious conversations, I just want to ask Danny what his thoughts are on the new Taylor Swift album. A significant moment. One thing you might not know about Danny Webster, you might know, that he can talk about the budget in 60 seconds. He can tell you all about fiscal drift. He can, talk us through many different political things, but he's also a massive Taylor Swift fan. So I would love to know, Danny, what are your thoughts on the new album?
Well, I was disappointed. I will be entirely honest. I had checked the release time. It was coming out at 5 a.m. UK time. I was up early to start working on Friday, up at about 7. Got it loaded, started listening, and it was just between bland and bad. There's some songs I just don't like. There were some songs that are fine, a bit catchy, but not. There's no real hits in there. There's none that I think I'm going to be listening to this again and again and again for time after time. And well, I'll just put it this way. I was in the car a fair amount over the weekend with my children, and it's not the kind of album I'm going to have on with the kids in the car because, well, we're a family-friendly podcast, so I'll probably say no more.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. No, it's actually not done super well compared to other albums. I'm also a massive Taylor Swift fan. It's not my favourite of her albums, but I have enjoyed some of it. But I do agree, there is a lot of swearing and, yes, other things going on. But I have listened to it. There are a few songs that I like, some I don't like as much. So it is one of those albums where you want to skip some songs. Peter, have you got any reflections on it? Have you listened?
I have listened to 2 or 3 songs because I have teenage daughters and it goes on in my car whether I like it or not. And then I was like, oh, that's the new Taylor Swift album. I was told it was. I have little else to say beyond that.
You're not interested in who was producing this album, the different influences on different Taylor Swift albums, the lack of Aaron Tressner on this album, which for me is a big downside, but...
This is what we mean. Danny literally knows the producers on different albums.
I have no idea what you're talking about. All I know is it was about some of her relationships and Travis and some past ones or something, but they all seem to be about these things.
Well, yes, generally her breakup albums are better than her in a relationship album.
Do you like the sad songs?
Yeah, the sad songs are much better.
But anyway, that was just a fun opener. Something else that we have seen this week that has kind of caught our eye is Stephen Bartlett, the host of Diary of a CEO. I'm sure many of you have seen that podcast. He's also actually, I don't know if he still is, but a dragon on Dragon's Den. He has made some interesting comments about faith, which have been picked up by lots of people and kind of reflect, I guess, this wider thing about people kind of questioning things, maybe for the first time in a long time or the first time ever. Peter, do you have any kind of thoughts or what's kind of grabbed your attention about the Steve Bartlett kind of thing?
Yeah, so I haven't listened to the whole episode. He's with the Cosmic Skeptic, I think. Alex Connor. That too. Anyway, Connor, that's the one. And he's basically talking about a friend kind of coming to faith or essentially getting much more interest in Jesus and his own disinterest, but actually now shifting. And I just think it's reflective of all that's going on. So I find the little clips fascinating. Our colleague Catherine did one on the Being Human Lens kind of account looking at it too. You can check that out. And lots of people, Glenn Scrivener and others, have commented. I think it's fascinating because it's reflective of so much is going on. Little story was like we were in Middlesbrough last week, some of us on a tour with EA, and a guy came forward and said 3 guys had come to his church the previous Sunday, all had come to faith during the week watching the Charlie Kirk funeral. And it's just like, and he was going, half my church thinks this is brilliant, the other half think it's crazy, and just navigating some of this. So it's just the reality of this changing space that we're in. I then talked about that on Sunday, and loads of people came forward wanted to talk to me all about these things that are happening, like Steve Bartlett, like Charlie Kirk's funeral. I think it's wonderful, but also slightly complex.
For sure. But it is very cool kind of seeing people being more public and even using their platforms to even mention these things. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. And I'm sure there are others that are having these kind of similar conversations. If you're seeing this, please do let us know. We'd love to hear about it. The other thing that just interesting happened this week that I kind of just feel like reflects the kind of more chaos in the world is the French Prime Minister resigning after only 27 days.
Yes. It is that if we think our political system is in trouble, it's difficult, we're not alone. Things are worse in other places. It is another saga in French politics. There are questions as to how they'll move forward, what they'll do next. I'm no expert on French politics, or at least not at the moment, but
not as much as Taylor Swift.
I do know more about Taylor Swift's albums than the French political system right now.
But yes, it definitely reflects that kind of wider kind of chaotic political news stories that seem to be filling our feeds daily. But yes, those are kind of our few little stories that we wanted to touch on in our introduction. But I'm now going to bring us into kind of our first big conversation. As I'm sure many of you saw and have seen the kind of fallout in the news last Thursday, there was an attack on a synagogue in Manchester. The government have called it a terrorist attack. 3 people have died, including the attacker. It also happened on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, which just makes the whole thing even more tragic. I think this is obviously an awful thing. So we're just going to spend some time thinking about it, and also thinking about, I guess, how the church responds to something like this. I've read some articles about churches in Manchester kind of, helping out and reaching out to their local communities, which is obviously good to see. Danny, what are your kind of reflections on what's happened?
Well, I think it's like, obviously the attack is awful and tragic, but I think one of the things that it has brought home to me is the fact that for Jewish communities, the security threat is a ever-present thing. Synagogues, Jewish schools have security guards outside them every time they meet, every time children are going into school. Members of the synagogue will volunteer, and that's part of their worship effectively, and that's normal. There is the CST is an organization dedicated to security among the Jewish community. This is a very high profile attack, but it highlights the fact that for Jewish communities, when they worship, they do so under a threat of violence and of attack. And the fact that that happens in the UK is something that has been brought home with this attack. And I think it's something for us to reflect on and to remember when we talk about the freedom of worship, when we talk about the freedom to gather and to worship, actually to remember that for some people, particularly for Jewish communities, there is a real risk as they do that. And I just think it's a reminder that these problems aren't just overseas. They're not just somewhere else, that they're here in the UK. And when we talk about some of these issues, it's a lot closer to home than we might sometimes want to think.
Yeah. And we were even saying, like with churches, we might have people on welcome outside the door, and maybe bigger churches do need to think. I mean, obviously we do need to think about security and stuff, but that kind of fear is so different. It's not like
it really is. And like I've been doing some work around Martin's Law, which is a new government approach which will put additional duties on public places, including places of worship and events. And I think for some churches and Christian events, there can sometimes be an attitude of, why do we need to do this? I think many others are taking their responsibilities really seriously, particularly large events, large churches are thinking it through, working out, well, what does this mean to us to ensure people attending are safe? But I think this is a reminder that it does matter, that actually places of worship aren't immune from attack. And actually, in the case of Jewish places of worship and synagogues, they are particularly vulnerable to attack that we've seen.
Yeah, I think it's really sad that the kind of sanctuary space that places of worship should be, has been lost. I agree with Danny. I mean, we lived in Vancouver for a number of years, and I remember going to an event in a Jewish kind of community centre and just being really, I mean, it was a play, it was an arts event, but just being struck by the level of security on entry and being reminded in that moment that is the ongoing nature of their experience here in the UK. And I think many of us were probably unaware of the level of that's just common, that the reaction was immediate at this synagogue because they were briefed and they were ready and they were used to it. And it's not unique in the sense that, like, I mean, I grew up in a church that had security all the time as a young person. I had a policeman on duty always because we had so many policemen went to our church. It was a very particular thing to Northern Ireland, but it's a reminder that that's within living memory. That was my reality as a young person. We had 17 policemen in our church, and somebody was always on duty. People were always armed in church. That was a kind of strange. You didn't have the noticeable security. We have been to an event. I've been at one recently where, again, it was significant security, bag checks on the way into a Christian event to Keswick. And again, armed police in attendance now, in the sense of probably in a much more community way, because we chatted to the people around that. But that is, again, to do with threat, and that happens. So I guess for me, the question below that is just how divisive has it become, and how divided are we that you have an event, major Christian events having security on, that you have synagogues always having that, and all Jewish schools, community engagements having that. And what kind of drives that level of disagreement? I'm just, we're going to come to a minute, and we're recording this on the 7th of October. It's 2 years on from the attacks. And it's not a simple, we want to be careful around the sides, right? But at the same time, how sad and how tragic that places of worship are going to need any level of defense when they are supposed to be the place of sanctuary.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds into this conversations around community, social cohesion. That's something that we engage with we think about a lot. And yeah, things like this, stories like this, situations like this are just reminders of how tense things are in places across the country. And yeah, there is a significant role for the church in that as well. That's something that we think about a lot when we are engaging with social cohesion, the role of the church and the way it kind of looks out to communities, looks out to, welcomes anybody in, and how significant that is. And actually often in the fallout of situations like this, what churches can do for people near them.
Well, I think it's a reminder that actually difference of religious beliefs shouldn't be a barrier to building strong community together. That Christians and Jews and Muslims and Sikhs and atheists believe different things. That's just true. But actually, that shouldn't be a barrier to living together well, to building community, to building friendships, to working out how we can support one another. Sometimes those differences will be really significant. And sometimes actually it's important to engage with some of those differences, to talk about them openly and not to ignore them. But it is important that we don't allow those differences to become polarizing, so it pulls communities apart, because I think that's what we've seen too often. The differences pull people apart rather than people working together, engaging despite their differences, and building community and strengthening communities. And I think churches can play a really important role in facilitating that, in encouraging that, engaging with leaders of other faiths, with other community groups, to help communities grow stronger together.
I think I do think this is a challenge to a secular society, because these are what I would call, I think, totalizing religions. So the Jewish community, Muslim community, and Christian community, it's an all-encompassing. This is not an add-on. This is not a side thing. Our faith is absolutely complete in terms of how it engages our lives. That's probably clear, I would think, within both the Jewish and the Islamic communities, in how their entire legal systems, they run parallel legal systems, if you like. But I do think it's a reminder that these things do not sit easily with the secular culture. Says, you can have your religion as a little bit of an add-on over here. We're saying, well, no, this is the most central thing in my entire life. And if it conflicts with the state, I will disagree. And we are actually seeing that, I suppose, then within other faiths are pushing back to say, we don't agree with what the UK government's doing, and we're going to kind of actively protest against it and come out. I'm really intrigued about some of the protests around this and some of the reaction to this. I mean, I'm shocked on one level, I think, at the kind of pro-Palestinian marches the very night that this attack occurred in the Manchester Synagogue. I think at Liverpool Street Station, and you these kind of, I thought, like, so insensitive, and yet at the same time, it's I think a failure to understand just how all-encompassing these religions are. And we will, as Christians, say we absolutely fundamentally disagree with these other religions, but I think we do get in a secular culture in a different way that these religions demand everything of people. And that is, and Christianity actually does it too. It's just that our values tend to be a bit more aligned. This is to the wider conversation about British values, and probably takes us back a lot of Christian nationalism. life in the UK feels a bit different because a lot of our culture is so drawn from Christian values that we are less jarring with our cultural moment. But I think I find what's going on at this moment really interesting because it is jarring with the secular world and saying, actually, yeah, this is demanding all of our lives. That doesn't justify it. But I am intrigued. But also I find it really hard to work out what happens next in our society because these clashes are so fundamental and so deep rooted. I think we are going to have more jarring moments before these things kind of get resolved to some degree. Because we're going to say, actually, we do disagree with, I disagree with Sharia law. I disagree with the aspects that you're trying to drive in that. That is incompatible, I think, with many aspects of what it is to live in Britain, actually, because of the Christian values that shape who we are. And as we see a rebirth in that, we will see more engagement around that and more jarring. That definitely doesn't justify violence.
And Peter, you were talking about the protests that were taking place on the day of the synagogue attack. We've seen protests planned for today, October the 7th. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, he's written in the Times. It's an interesting piece, discouraging people, which is interesting as a Prime Minister that you write in a newspaper discouraging people from engaging in action. But it does just bring home the level of division and polarization, particularly around those attacks. The October the 7th attacks, 1,200 people were killed, 250 people taken hostage. It sparked the last 2 years of war in Gaza. Reports suggest maybe 60,000 people have died in that conflict. Significant humanitarian crises in Gaza. Huge challenges in that region, huge problems in terms of actually how to resolve that situation. And actually, almost, it's not an aside, it's a very important part of it. A peace process, a peace proposal is on the table. It is being discussed this very week, actually. Representatives of both Hamas and the Israeli government are talking about it. So all of these things are linked together, from the local community cohesion to the big international geopolitical steps. And actually, that's where kind of it links into today, to the anniversary, that partly because it's the 7th of October, we want to specifically remember the attacks that took place then, that started this. But you can't detach that from both the wider conflict that has followed, but also from the local repercussions, whether that's protests or attacks on synagogues, and the feeling that so much of this is unstable. And it's not everything is intimately connected, but it's also not completely disconnected. There was an arson attack on a mosque in Sussex at the weekend. It feels like there is a greater level of division and tension between communities, both locally and globally. And I think it's something that we really need to pray into, but also work with in our global system, and hope that we can move forward.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to be, there are no simple sides here. There's no, this is good or this is bad. I don't think, you've got 48 hostages still held, probably only 20 still alive. While those hostages are held, that's an absolute breach of international law. That's clear as day, and that should be one of the things we're calling for. Also, Israel's response has been beyond defence. It is absolutely into the territory of vengeance, in my opinion. And some people don't like that. I think they absolutely had the entitlement to defend themselves. But we're now 2 years on, and the acts are well beyond anything that was allowable under kind of understandings of international law, in my view. But both sides, then, we have to say, well, that's problematic. You can't be holding hostages, and you can't be exacting revenge in the way that it's going on at this moment. And Israel is a secular state. It's not carrying on some religious mandate. Though Israel, as a nation, may have some special status, what that is understood to be, how the church engages in that, lots of really interesting questions. But these are complex, both for Christians and for wider society. I don't think there's an easy, I'm all for this side, or this side's got everything right. That requires a lot more nuance. And one of our colleagues has written a prayer, and we'll probably close off with that, acknowledging where we are in the conversation 2 years on.
Yeah, and I think it's, and even us having a 10-minute conversation or an 800-word article just doesn't do these things justice when we don't have the words or know what to say. That we can pray, and that is one thing we can do. So we will come back to that prayer at the end of this episode, but yes, it will also be linked below in the show notes, and I'd really recommend you have a look at that as well. The next thing that we're going to talk about is something that is also happening today. We are currently still in the middle of the Conservative Party conference. I don't know. You may well have missed that it's happening. I don't know, but it is happening. So, Danny, I'm just going to come straight to you. Do you have what's caught your eye about it? Do you have much to say?
Did you know that today is Crime and Justice Day at the Conservative Party conference? Yesterday was all about the economics. Tomorrow is Kemi Badenoch's second speech. She gave a speech on Sunday to open the conference, and she'll give one tomorrow on Wednesday, when this podcast will land in your feed, to close the conference. But you may have missed it all. Attendance is significantly down. Our colleague who was there described, apparently the Christian events were quite lively and quite upbeat. The rest of the conference was somewhat dead, which is interesting. Maybe the Christians are bringing some hope, but who knows? It does feel slightly irrelevant. And that is just, I'm not trying to make a political partisan comment, but it feels as though the energy and the attention is somewhere else. The Conservatives are struggling in the polls. They are the second party in Parliament, but in the polls they are not. Keir Starmer in his speech gave far more attention to Nigel Farage and reform than he did to the Conservatives. And Kemi Badenoch is the leader. There doesn't seem to be an active move to oust her right now. Actually, technically, she can't be ousted until November this year because of the rules of the party. And I think people are going to give her at least until the elections next year, probably a bit longer, because, well, actually, who wants to take on the mantle of leading the party right now? But there's been a blizzard of announcements, 45 policy announcements, I heard. Some of them are interesting, some of them are eye-catching. A £5,000 national insurance rebate on your first job for your first home. Interesting, but are they ever going to be in a position to do it? They're committed to leaving the ECHR. That was kind of coming for months, so that's not a real surprise. They're slashing the international development budget, making £47 billion of savings across welfare and other areas. But Kemi Badenoch had been criticised for not having any policy. Now she has loads of policy, it seems, but is anyone paying attention? And I think that's the challenge for the party, that they're just no one's paying attention to them. No one is giving them the thought that this is a serious, credible alternative to the Labour government, and therefore, actually, it doesn't matter.
It is kind of crazy how quickly things can change. Like, I mean, they were in power for so long, and suddenly, here we are, 2025, things look so different. Reform Party conference was a much bigger deal, was hitting the headlines every day. And now it feels like, people aren't even...
And this is the thing, the Reform Party conference was very policy light. So that's one of my big questions to them, is it was policy light. They've got a lot of things to figure out. And they've been busy announcing their defections over the last few days. A blizzard of councillors, I say a blizzard, 5 or 6 defected. This morning on Tuesday, I've kind of been waiting for the big name defection to come during party conference. It hasn't come yet. It could come. As Kemi Badenoch steps up to speak tomorrow, maybe. We'll see.
Yeah. The other...
And I think Matthew Said, as the Times columnist, was there, was kind of interesting. I haven't read all the speech, but certainly was pushing back Farage as a socialist. And it's a little bit like the DUP in our context. A lot of the policies are closer to the left and to the right. So there's this kind of sense of they're replacing the Conservatives, that Reform replaced the right. They should, I think the members have said, the poll of the members suggests they should go into a pact. But I do think it's way more complicated than that, and Reform, in as much as they have policies, do span across. They've attracted quite a wide variety of people, and a lot of their policies either aren't funded or might mean way more to the left. So I think, again, the speed of change can work both ways. We've seen that on a number of issues. You look at something like the trans conversation, it was all moving one direction a few years ago, and then suddenly has all moved back again. So I think there's a little reminder to us all that this has shifted, and Reform are polling at levels that suggest they will be in government, but the election is still a number of years out. That could all swing back very quickly. You could say this is the last Tory party conference, probably.
That was my next question.
They're gone, they're off the charts, But things can move. So I wouldn't be, if I were Labour or any other party, both concerned and potentially excited. If you're a smaller party, we could see massive movements. I just think politics as normal isn't going to remain the same necessarily, but that doesn't mean in 5 years you couldn't be back to the same system. So I think there's a number of things that we want to be interested in and be alert to, but also the whole left, right? That conversation, when you come to something like reform, is way more complicated. Are they far right, far left, middle, everything? I mean, they're a little bit of everything, I would say. And a lot of the parties have moved to the middle, and then we've seen more extreme parties on either side. But I just think politics is way more complicated, and those labels don't really work in the same way they once did.
I was waiting for you to refer to the vibe shift in that section. You were like, all this shifting. I was like, is the vibe shift going to come up? And then the other conference that was also happening was the Green Party conference. I'm not sure if either of you have looked into that much. A couple of headlines that caught my eye. Zach Polanski, and the leader, wants to legalise all drugs. Another thing he mentioned was abolishing private landlords. So not sure how those two things, what that would look like.
Yeah,
it might be the only thing less relevant than the Tory Party conference is the Green Party conference. Once they work out what a woman is, we could listen to them on other matters. They're very maverick.
And it is interesting because in some ways, people are saying actually if the Labour Party are neglecting their traditional left-wing base, is there a space there, whether it's for Jeremy Corbyn and Zana Sultana's Your Party? That's just their holding title. A full name will come in due course. Or the Green Party, there's talk there could be some form of pact there. Actually, is there a space on the left of British politics for a force that, with this fragmenting of politics, could you see more support going there? And then we've got the Liberal Democrats that are still polling at their kind of regular level, but no one's particularly excited about them. British politics is just complicated. I do agree with Peter, though, that things can change. And I think there is a space, and I was thinking about this recently, for a party, it could be the Conservative Party, but it could be someone else, for a credible centre-right, even granting the fact that the left-right things don't always make that much sense. But where's that future going to come from? Politics moves so fast that there isn't really the space for reflection and taking time, establishing what you stand for and what you're going to achieve. So maybe a new party that will come up in the future. That's where politics is unpredictable. The Conservative Party will still be around next year. They will have a conference. It might be even smaller. They might have a new leader. Who knows?
We will see in 2026. You are listening to Cross Section. Thank you so much for engaging with us. Thank you. Whether you're watching or listening, we would love to hear your thoughts. We also now have extended show notes. So if you have found this interesting, do check out I'm really excited about them. Our website. And the page that comes with this episode, and you can find articles that to kind of for further reading and other resources that come along with the conversation as well. The other thing I'm going to quickly mention now, as Alicia is not here on this episode, and the three of us that are the three members of the Cross Section team that are really excited about getting Cross Section mugs. I am going to speak for all of us as I say that. I'm glad we're now in a wide shot, because this floral mug that Danny uses, I think needs replacing. So, Peter's got a nice mug. So in a future episode, get excited, because
last week I had a floral shirt on.
I know, but you didn't use the mug. I
didn't have the mug, no, so it didn't quite match.
Yeah, only one thing of florals per episode, I think. But yes, watch this space for that. But meanwhile, please do share this episode with others. Right, I'm now going to bring us into our final conversation, a very significant one. It's been a significant week for the church. The new Archbishop of Canterbury has been announced. It has been nearly a year since, it was November last year, wasn't it?
Yeah.
When Welby resigned. Dame Sarah Mullally, I think, is that how you say it? Mullally? Yeah. The first female Archbishop of Canterbury, which is obviously hugely significant. And it has, sparked lots of conversation. A couple of things to note: she has been really good on the kind of assisted suicide conversation. That's something that she has spoken up into, that would kind of align with us. But other things less so. Who wants to kind of kick us off? Peter does. Of how we kind of respond to this. What you want to?
Well, firstly, look, it is the first woman, the 106th Archbishop of Canterbury. So theologically, I'm okay with that. Cards on the table on that. I understand others aren't. It was the logical end point in many ways of decisions made quite some time ago. It was inevitable. You kept moving there, and many had noted that. I don't think that will ultimately split the communion, but only because it's already split. I mean, GAFCON have been really clear that they feel abandoned. So GAFCON are a global alliance of more conservative Anglicans, and the Church of England, they say, have chosen a leader who will further split or divide the communion beyond what already is. So you've got that conversation, and there's been a little bit of commentary on that. I think that is significant, but people will have different theological views on that. You hinted, I'll say one, but like you did say about the assisted suicide, and she has been really outspoken on that. Her background is as a chief nurse and midwife, and coming in from there, where that is deeply problematic, and I feel a total disconnect is while she's really strong assisted suicide, is fundamentally she described herself as pro-choice and has been really unhelpful and actually just fundamentally wrong on the decriminalisation of abortion. Doesn't seem to comprehend the issue, which, to be fair, she's far too smart for that to be true. So I just don't understand her position there. This is her background, her area, and she was in favour of decriminalisation. I mean, that just shows absolutely no understanding of the right and value of the unborn child, and a fundamental undermining of human dignity. So I really struggle with the two positions she's holding there. And she has driven through a lot of the same-sex blessings. And my objection there is people will have different views. I think that's biblically incorrect and wrong, her position. But more problematically, it is at odds with her vows. I do think this is where the Global South are right to say, hold on, your promise fundamentally as a bishop and as a priest is to uphold the teachings of the Church of England. The teaching of the Church of England remains that marriage is between one man and one woman. So to promote something that is contrary to that is just a breach of your own promises, and that's the bit I object to. I'm saying you can have a different view. I still think that would be wrong, but I do think you are now breaching your own promises, and I just think that's really problematic to lead a church and have that. This is the issue that's dividing the Church of England. So, yeah, we can come back to that's my first rant over.
And I think I'll pick up on some of the questions around and the issues around sexuality in just a moment. But coming back to the question on abortion, in 2012. Her comments that have been widely reported, she wrote, "I would suspect that I would describe my approach to this issue as pro-choice rather than pro-life. Although if it were a continuum, I would be somewhere along it moving towards pro-life when it relates to my choice, and then enabling choice when it related to others, if that makes any sense." So that's what she has said. That was writing on a personal blog in 2012. She wrote that, which incidentally, while she was vicar of a church quite close to where I live now in Sutton. And one of the criticisms, and I think there has been some unhealthy criticism of her, some that I don't think is very positive, to be honest. I think people can disagree with her. People can have, I think for some, they will have a substantive issue with the fact that a woman is leading the Church of England. For others, they will want to make a specific issue with some of her theological beliefs that we would probably have. I think some of the criticism of her has... this phrase has been used, criticising her as a member of the lanyard class, which I had not come across. Apparently, it was coined by Lord Morris Glassman to refer to people who spend their life in conferences, HR settings, i.e. always wearing a lanyard. And she has been classified as part of this. She was the chief nurse. She was the youngest ever chief nurse. She had achieved a significant amount. She then came into Church of England ministry relatively late in her career, and her only full-time role as a church leader as a local church leader, was in Sutton, where I live, where she was rector of a church there for, I think, 9 years before becoming first a junior bishop and then the Bishop of London. So some people have said, well, she isn't theologically trained, and she has the basic theological training you need for the Church of England, but she is not a theologian of note. She's also not got a hugely extensive experience. But I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on is, what would have been the better option for the Church of England? Now, I am not a member of the Church of England. I am a nonconformist. I would describe myself as an independentist, if that makes sense. I think the whole idea of large structures of church governance cause more problems than they solve. So I have so many issues with how the Church of England is organised. But it is a divided church. I think there were some candidates who are more evangelical, who were being considered or touted for the role, one who was rumoured to be on the shortlist. If they had got the job, a huge amount of pressure would have been on them. Now, they might have done a brilliant job. They might have led the church in a superb way. They might have rejected unorthodox teaching on sexuality, on other issues. They might have marked a step change in how the church has confidence in the gospel. I also think there's a real risk that they would have got bogged down in the institution, in the division and the debates. And partly I want to say, at least with someone who clearly thinks differently, there is clarity about the lines and where different people stand. I think for the church to formally adopt a position supportive of same-sex marriage would be wrong. My hope is that they don't do that. And my hope is that there are ways that evangelicals within the Church of England can retain their distinctiveness and their role. But I think actually hearing from people who have been in churches in London, there are some churches that haven't been wholly happy with how she's handled things, but some have been happy. Some evangelicals have felt that she's done a good job of accommodating difference. So maybe that's something to look for in a positive sense. So I am probably more open-minded towards her leading the Church of England than some evangelicals have been, because some of the response has been very critical of her. I would want to still recognise the points of deep difference and areas where it is potentially quite problematic. But I think with the caveats that I think the Church of England has significant problems anyway, I would want to pray for her and want to encourage evangelicals within the Church of England to work with her to try and find a way forward.
I agree. I think she has a reputation as a good manager. That's sometimes seen as a negative, but that's reality. She is strongly supportive of parishes. And as you say, Danny, people have said that she respects difference. The Bishop of Ebbsfleet himself, who is the kind of Orthodox bishop, who, for those who don't agree with the woman, has said she has always been very engaging with him and has basically respected their strand, if you like, within the church. So there's some optimism there. I do think it's an unenviable task. So that's got to be said. It's interesting how quickly it's faded from the news in many ways, certainly the mainstream news. And I do think it's tricky because Welby basically should have gone because he fudged everything, in the end around the marriage stuff and got sidetracked down there. So I don't think that's a great place for her to come out of, but that the church is in a really difficult, the Church of England, really difficult space in that. It is a mixed bag on that, and I don't know how you navigate that. Safeguarding is ultimately what brought Welby down and may well be a real issue for Sarah Mullally, because there's a lot of talk around how that was operated under her leadership in London. So again, that is why it's unenviable, because everything ultimately comes to you. The buck stops to you for everything. And incredibly difficult. My biggest hope in this moment, so am I praying for her? Absolutely, because there's lots of evangelicals within the Church of England. I might struggle to understand how they do all of that, but I respect that they do, and they're also saying, why should we be the ones to walk away? So I want to pray for them in that, and I really hope they get the freedom to do what they do, both the Conservatives, the Charismatics, everything in between on that. So I think that's really important. But I also hope that we do see a range of leaders. What we've seen in the last 9 months is that the ABC is not a significant role as it once was, the Archbishop of Canterbury. It's only the church in England, for one thing. It's the part of the church that is probably growing less than many others. And I'd love to see the leaders of the RCCG and the ELIM and AOG, the EA, and many other of the spokespeople and people like Bishop Jill Duff and others, lots of an evangelical bishop within the Church of England, where those voices coming to the fore much more, rather than the Church of England, the Archbishop, being seen as speaking for the church in the UK. That is just dwindling in terms of its impact. If there's 6 million people going to church, and I think it's about 1 million of them are in the Church of England, it's significant, but it's no longer the bulk and the growing and the thriving part of the church. So we need to look at the spokespeople piece, and I really hope that other voices will come forward. And she is not a kind of outspoken person in that way, so there may be space for other voices. So I think it is what it is. The Church of England will do what it does. I still want to pray for those in leadership of it, because it has an impact. It has an impact on a lot of people, and that's why I'm praying into the role.
And it's also, as you were saying, a huge task and a huge thing to step into at a difficult point. And I think
as Peter was saying, the role of Christian leaders is important. So the role of visible Christian leaders, and it is just one of the things that if you're a bishop, particularly if you're the Archbishop, you get more media attention. I would love the BBC, the Times, other media outlets to feature other Christian leaders as prominently as they do leaders from the Church of England. But that doesn't happen. So it does matter what the leaders of the Church of England say. So I think it does matter who is in those posts. But I would hope that we see a widening of engagement, of focus from the media, whether that's with government or what we see in the press. I think we need those Christian leaders to speak up as well. You can't just wait for the media to come. So I think there is a challenge for church leaders to think, well, actually, how can we engage publicly? For most church leaders, their focus is on their congregation. Even for leaders of networks and denominations, their focus is on their church and on their networks. So it is a challenge seeking to speak into public life. It is also fraught with risks. We are used to speaking into public issues. There are many landmines, many challenges. So I know why some church leaders might want to avoid some of the public scrutiny that comes with that. But actually, you can end up ducking some of the issues, and you can leave the space open for others and those who will take the microphone. So I would want to encourage people to actually be willing to engage publicly. If we want a more evangelical perspective in our public life, in our media, in terms of with government, we need to be the ones to provide it. So as well as looking at people saying, actually, why are you getting all the airtime? We need to be able to step up.
Thanks. Thank you both for navigating some complex conversations, and I hope this has been helpful in helping you think things through if you're kind of struggling to know how to even approach it. I'm just going to close and then hand over to Peter, who's going to finish the episode with the prayer that we mentioned earlier. But thank you so much for engaging, and we hope you have a really, really good week. But Peter, over to you.
Yes, so Father, as we close, I would just want to pray for some of those leaders like Jill Duff, like Gav, our own boss, like John Stevens and Mark Pugh, Leeds Elam and Glenn Barrett at AOG, and Pastor Agu and Pastor Celia and Pastor Nims. Like, we have leaders in lots of different spheres who are trying to speak up and are engaging in these conversations. So we do pray for them, along with the new Archbishop of Canterbury, because of the space that she leads in this moment. But we also want to pray we're recording on the 7th, but people will be listening to this afterwards. And in light of the 2-year anniversary, we say, Father God, we pause to look back 2 years on since the violent attacks on Israel. And we remember and grieve over 1,200 people murdered and over the 251 people taken hostage. Closer to home, we mourn the Jewish community who were targeted in Manchester last week. And we bring before you the ongoing war in Gaza and the 60,000 lives lost, each one, Muslim, Christian, Jew, other, bearing your sacred image. Words do not easily come in the face of such violence, death, and destruction. And so we wait for a moment in silent lament. In this act of intercession, we encounter you, holder of nations in your hands. We stand with those in the midst of pain, grief, and chaos, pleading them before you. You are the God who frees captives, who raises up the crushed and the oppressed. Lord, defender of orphans and widows, protect life, grant liberty. Restrain evil and bring forth good. Send your Spirit to comfort, heal, revive and restore, move in power even now. We pray for diplomats and intermediaries on the ground and for those who are trying to bring about a sustainable, peaceful resolution. Help them trace the footsteps of the Prince of Peace who walked those very same dusty roads. Give prophetic imagination, great wisdom and favour in your sight. We dare against the seeming odds to pray in Israel and Gaza as it is in heaven. Peace upon peace. Amen.